Okay, so this is the second part of the video that I'd like to make about data logs. The first video we kind of went over how to set up your data points and how to gather as much data as possible. Connecting to the vehicle, pulling, getting all this over here. That's the first thing you have to do. Once you get your data, you can get out of the car, go in the house like I am now, and you can change all of this and it'll go feed off of this data to show you whatever it is that you want to look at. You can completely mess with it. The main thing is to set this up initially so that you're getting us all the data points that you need, and then go out and actually drive the car and do a data log. Something I forgot to mention in the last video was when you do a data log, it's important to hit as many points as possible. One of the ways that you can do this is by running it through the full RPM range under different load conditions. So that means find a hill and go up the hill and try and pull up the hill like you would drive normal. Then go down a hill and drive you like you would normal. I would, especially for a daily driver, recommend that when you're doing your data log and you're actually gathering your data, that you drive for at least 15-20 minutes under normal conditions. Drive to and from work if you're able to, because if that's going to be your daily drive that you do the most, that's where you're going to want to adjust your tune and see what it's doing during those time periods. You can also get a lot of the data by going and doing the exact same motion over and over again, but at different rates. What I mean by that is find like a straightaway on an empty street. Usually it's best to do an industrial area, and go ahead and start from a dead stop and just slowly accelerate all the way through first gear. With an automatic transmission, you're probably going to have to put it down in one and manually go all the way through first gear at a nice slow steady rate, and then come to a complete stop. You can I'd even let it coast down while it's still in first gear, then go to put it in two and do the same thing, bring all the way up and all the way back down. You're going to want to do that through all the different gears, and you're going to want to do that also at different rates, which means the first time maybe you do it with like quarter throttle. The next time you do it with a little bit more throttle. Next time you do it with a pretty heavy foot, and then initially you're going to want to go from a dead stop and just vary the throttle and go all the way up through the RPM range so that you can really see what your wide open throttle fueling is doing and when it's transitioning to wide open throttle. There's a lot of good data, especially if you're tuning for power, that you want to get during your wide open throttle pulls. Sometimes if your vehicle is accelerating too fast, it won't gather data points in first gear, meaning you hit the gas and it's flying through the data points so fast that if you remember over here with our pulling intervals, maybe your interval for this parameter is at 2 seconds. Well, if you flew right past that from here to here in 2 seconds, you're not going to get solid data. So typically what we do when we put the car on a dyno, or if I want to get some really solid wide open throttle data, is I'll bring it all the way through first gear, second gear, all the way until it's in third gear, and then hammer it and hold it down in third gear. You're also going to want to make sure your traction control is turned off for this, and you're going to want to make sure that your transmission, if it's automatic, is in the 3 position so that it does not shift out of that based on just torque load or transmission shift schedules. So that being said, let's assume that you have some good data, and we'll proceed on to playing with the rest of these graphs. I did not open up a lot of data, but I have a quick one that we can open just to go over things. So this is one that I took this morning, just trying to figure out. You can see I labeled it cold start and down low hesitation, second attempt. I'm going to open that. And this is kind of this, you'll probably be able to see this cam error that I'm having under tip in and right when I open the throttle. In those conditions, you can kind of see that. We might review that. However, it's to get a data log, it's pretty easy, by the way. You connect to your vehicle. You go right here where it says start scanning. Click on that. Give it a minute. You'll see all of these parameters will start to have numbers there, and then just go ahead and start your car. let it run through 30 to 60 seconds of idling just so you get your idle data right off the bat from a cold start. When you're all done, and this is kind of the important part, make sure that you come to a complete stop. Go ahead and hit stop scanning. It's going to take a minute, especially if you've got a lot of data that it's been trying to memorize, and it'll finalize all of the data and get it ready to save. After you hit stop, make sure that you go over here to the disk and save the file and save it as whatever you want. You can see I put mine in with a date as well as what it was that I was the target that I was trying to achieve. Which for this one, it was trying to figure out why I've got a hesitation right off idle when it's being cold. Once it's saved, you can go back and you look at it whenever. But if you don't hit that, as soon as you unplug it from the vehicle and you go to play with these tables, all of that data is just going to disappear. So make sure you take care of that. Just going over some of the basic controls when you're looking at a data log, you have right here, you can see this is zoom in and zoom out. Now, when I'm doing the zoom in and zoom out, if you watch this table over here, and you watch the size of this scroll bar, you see a scroll bar, that red line is your RPMs, and it basically just goes through everything. And if you look at the size of this scroll bar, we'll go over here where data, you can see these data points a little bit more spiky, if you will. So if we zoom in, see how those kind of level out right here, and you can see how this gets smaller as well. That's important to note because when we go over to our graphs, sometimes zooming in and zooming out, you can really pinpoint and change your averages. So you can zoom all the way in to where you're down to viewing just a couple seconds, or you can zoom all the way out until you're viewing more or less the entire thing. See, that's the entire run, but you can't quite read it. That's why we usually like to zoom in a little bit. Maybe keep it right about right there, so I can get a few blips or something in there. Now, if you wanted to play it, if you want to play this data and actually watch your gauges, all you have to do is just hit this play button, and it'll start from wherever you are. If you notice, there's this little blue line right here. That blue line correlates with this right here. If you move this, you can see that moves. So we're going to go ahead and start right here, and I'm just going to hit play. This is on 2x, so it's going to play it at 2 times actual speed. And you can see the gauges and everything is going and changing. And you can actually see where it's reading where you're at right over here in this graph. You can change that too. There's spark, and it's reading our different spark. We'll go ahead and pause this. You can change the speed all the way down to 0.1x, which is like slow motion. Now, if you've got a 15-20 minute drive, you can understand that that's now going to take you 150 to 200 minutes at that rate just to review it. So this is only if you're trying to pinpoint a very, very small area. And if you do 100x, you went on a road trip and you were data logging a full road trip, that might be feasible. Typically, you want it between 1 and 5x. I usually leave it right at 2 because that seems to be fast enough that I don't get bored watching it, but it's slow enough that you can actually still pause it and go back and check individual points. So now that you're able to understand how to read the play the actual data and whatnot, something that I typically do, this gauge is really cool. It's fun to show your friends, especially if you open it up and play with it. You can right click here and you can go to gauge layout and add or subtract whatever you want to this gauge. It's kind of a neat feature, but I'll be honest, I don't really use it a whole lot. I'm more interested in getting the data log and keep my eyes on the road, and then when I come back, I review the data log and all the data here inside the charts and the time plot. So this probably looks nothing like yours. If you're new to HP tuners, you probably only have 5 or 6 parameters in here, and you're like, okay, well, how the hell do I do that? So all you gotta do, same thing, right click, charts layout, and you can see there's different groups. You can label these groups whatever you want. I just leave my groups group 1, group 2, group 3, but you could have one for your air fuel ratio, one for cams, one for spark, one for fuel pressure, and you can see you can label them whatever you want. I just leave them blank. You can also change the format of this just like we did with the other with over here where we change it to blue. You can right click display properties and you can change your background to whatever you want. There's also layouts. It's somewhere over here. I don't really use it a whole lot. But you can actually go over in the layout and make it as there's a daytime and a nighttime. Oh, there it is. You have dark and light. So see, you can change this to make it bright. I personally have an easy time reading dark things, so I'll leave them in dark. That and I personally, like I said, I like the blue and the black. So we can go through, if we wanted to add something to this, these parameters, you go back to your charts layout. And it's just like over here, a lot of the stuff you can see carries over. There's so much to go over with all the data logging and how to data log and how to understand it and interpret it. I could go on for hours. I'm trying to make these videos as short as possible. So you can go to these different groups. You can add a group by selecting this, and it'll just literally add another group that'll be blank. Once you add a group, you can click Add Series. Is this right here, and that's going to add, see, new series. So it's going to come with that. Now, whatever data we want it to read, we're going to put right here, and where it says Insert to Change. And let's just say for shits and giggles, let's do engine, general. Now, if you notice, see all the data here, all these different data points, like sonic airflow, flywheel power potential, flywheel power max. I don't have any of that on my vehicle. So it's not going to show up. If you click on something that your vehicle didn't pull the data for, it's just going to end up being blank. I'll go ahead and do an example of that. So let's just do sonic airflow, mass airflow here. And close this. So you can see where it says new series, pounds per hour, that's the measurement, and it's just blank. There's literally nothing there. And the reason that there's nothing there is because my vehicle does not data log that. So the way to get around that, we'll go back to our charts layout. We'll click on this, our new series right here, and it's sonic airflow. When we open this up, if you click this little box right here, it says show only parameters backed by channels. So you click that, and notice how this shrunk down just now. And what that's going to do is that's going to eliminate any available channels that your vehicle does not have. That's important to note because a turbocharged vehicle from the factory is going to have barometric sensors, several of them typically. It's going to have boost sensors, it's going to have vacuum sensors, it's going to have all these things that my vehicle doesn't have or your vehicle may not have. So by checking that, it just gets rid of all those parameters that you don't have. So now we can go to engine and general, and that means anything that's showing up here I have. So let's just go with time sense engine start. And when this pops up, this basically, sometimes it says SAE, standard American equivalency, or whatever the hell that stands for. We don't always calculate that. It's basically showing that there's a difference between what the actual sensor is and what the sensor that we're clicking on is. And down here it says, would you like to use a generic sensor instead? If you are really advanced, go ahead and click this if you know what you're doing, but most of the time, 99% of the time, you can click, you're good to go. Now you can see it's shown up right over here, and it'll turn into, once I close out of this and hit the left or right arrows to change where we are on the scroll bar at all, it'll automatically put that in. But for now, you can see the limits, minimum and maximum. I guess this isn't really the best one to show you this, but the minimum and maximum is what is displayed over here. There's your maximum, there's your minimum. I'll go into this with some temperatures and some things here in a minute, just so you understand it and realize its importance. But we can change the color of this, so let's just do violet. I'm about to delete it anyway. So here you go. Okay. And then see how it's blank? You're like, what the heck? As soon as you hit left or right, all I did was hit the left and right arrows, or you move this at all, it will show up. So it's 82 seconds, 87, 90. So you can see this is literally only just a couple minutes of me flipping the throttle in the driveway just so I can gather some data to put on paper for you. So You also got to take in mind that as this goes over, if you notice, our graph went from being from here to there. It kind of significantly moves it. So I try and arrange them so that it's as short as possible as far as the distance goes from here to there. You can also move this over, get a little bit extra comfort. So we'll go back to charts layout and we'll pick something different. Let's go to throttle. Let's go to time. Let's go to timing. So we're going to go to engine, go down to spark, general, knock feedback. Oh, I don't recognize any of those. So I have to click that button, so I'm only looking at things that on my vehicle. So yeah, advanced. So we can go to the timing advance. Here's borderline knock. Basically, what's on the borderline knock table. We'll go to timing advance. Same thing. You know, the difference between SAE and manufacturer. Yes, sounds good. So this is where it comes into some of the more advanced portions of this. You have your decimals. How many decimals do you want it in there? If you put 2, it'll lead 1.1 or 1.2 or 2.2, or it'll have 2 decimals. If you have 6 in there, you're going to have a ton of zeros that don't mean anything, and it's unnecessary. Usually I leave it at 1 unless it's something that I really need a precise measurement on, like say the pulse width for the injectors or something similar, where you really got to be a little bit more nitty-gritty. Your filter in your milliseconds, that's something you typically don't have to mess with unless you're getting into some more advanced tuning. I usually just leave it at whatever the default is. You can notice you can change this from degrees, radian, I usually leave it in degrees. With other things, say if you're measuring your airflow rate, it'll be in pounds per minute, grams per second, a few other things. If you're looking at your O2 sensors, it'll usually show you lambda air fuel ratio for gasoline, diesel, alcohol, a few other different things. So this is kind of a nice feature. You can drop them down to whatever you're familiar with. I'm most familiar with degrees, so I'm going to leave them there. Your limits. Your limits does not mean that it will not display an integer over this amount. All it's saying is that this graph right here, if you notice, you have a high and low number, and so this one, the high is 100 and the low is 0, the middle is 50. That means that when it's 50, it'll go through the middle. When it's 100, it'll go through the top. The importance of this is if we put our time, if we put say 200 in this cell, and lift this at 0, and then we're looking at our timing. Matter of fact, I will pick a color that stands out really well. It's bright green. There we go. There we go. So now you can see our spark is showing up on green in this table. And we're going to go ahead and change this to 200. And then we're going to go ahead and close out of this. Say nothing's showing up, and then we're going to just click on your table and hit left or right just once, and it'll show up. Now wherever your white line is, that's your spark. Now, if we're trying to look at this graph, let's move this over so we have as much. We'll get back to this in a minute. As much room as possible so that you can really see what. So you can see the changes in spark when you're looking from here to there are these little tiny blips. But look, 17, and this little tiny blip right here is 28. That's a pretty large change in timing, but it's not showing up as far as visually on the graph. And the reason for that is because our max is set at 200, which is unrealistic. We're never going to have a timing of 200. So to correct that, let's go back in here. We'll click on Spark, and we'll change this. Realistically, your timing on mine, I have a max timing set at 60, and that's only in deceleration, going downhill, getting pulled by the wind, and a lot of parameters that I'm rarely going to hit. Definitely not going to hit under any load. So we'll go ahead and put this at 60, and then you can put your minimum. I'll put your minimum at negative 60, whatever the opposite is, wherever you really think you're going to be. And the purpose for the negative, being that it's timing goes positive and negative. Realistically, I don't think we're going to hit negative 60. We can do negative 20, but we'll do 60 just for the visualization effect of it being in the center. Your reference line, by the way, you can click that and put in a value. So if we enable the reference line, it's going to put a line right smack through the middle, so you can see how close it is to your reference point. Your reference point is put in here. If your timing is typically supposed to be or around where the RPMs that you're looking for, you're having a problem, if it's supposed to be around 20, and you put in 20 in a reference line, the reference line and this green line, which is our part, should be lined up. And if they're not lined up, you'll kind of see, imagine if it was the red line was the reference line, you can see how the green line is kind of following that. It would look similar to that. That's not what's going on, but it would look similar. We don't really need a reference line right now, especially not for this, since I'm just demonstrating. But we'll go ahead and close out of this. And now if you notice our spark, it's much more noticeable to see the changes in our spark. I mean, you can see before this was just a flat line, and now you can see there you're at 16.5 and 15.9. So you can see half a degree of timing by bringing your minimum and maximum to feasible values. Something to note too is that I was having a problem before right over here with my not correction. It was always right here in the bottom, so I could never tell what the hell is going on, because when it's not correction shows up as a negative number. What I did was that if you look right here, my knock is red, the numbers are red, so this line is red, and if you look at the red numbers right here, so now I changed it from positive 15 to negative 15 degrees of timing with 0 in the middle. So now I have a red line in the middle. It should always be flat unless there's knock detected. If there's knock detected, it'll go ahead. Let's see if we have any knock. Looks like there was no knock detected during strong, which does not surprise me, as there wasn't a whole lot of RPMs and almost 0 load. Yeah, so no knock detected. But nonetheless, you kind of get where it's going with that. What it did is it moved that line, this line, by having a negative number down here. It moved it from right here on the very edge to in the middle where it's more visible. You can actually see where it's going. There's a few things like right here with my cam angle, moved it to negative 10. All that did was just, you can see that there was a lot of lines right here. There's negative 1, negative 1, negative 10, negative 10. There was a lot of lines right here that were all stacked because the cams are most of the time at a certain angle. They were all stacked so closely that you weren't able to visualize any difference between all of them. So what I did is put the offset negative 10, negative 1, negative 10, negative 1, and now you can see that red, blue, light blue, and then pink. This separates those lines. So that being said, we won't run through what each of these parameters mean right now, just because that's a whole nother video. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll do another video here about your graphs. Graphs, personally, for me, are the most helpful. This is really cool down here for displaying things and for getting like kind of close. You're like, okay, what's going on in this range and what's going on under this load condition. It's kind of a nice visual, but really the graphs is where you're going to kind of pull your data from to make your changes in your tune most of the time. So that being said, we'll go ahead and close this, and I'm just going to reopen right in the next video.